Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Paul's Cinema Picks of the Week. I am your host, Paul Westbrook, and first I want to apologize for not being around the past couple weeks, but I've been suffering a bit of a cold, so you probably hear it in my voice. But being you watch the show most of the time anyway, I'm sure you can forgive me anyway. All is forgiven in that category. And speaking categories, yes, this week is the Oscars. Yes, in fact, tomorrow night. And yes, remember to turn your clock, or is it move your clocks ahead?
Spring ahead.
Spring ahead, yes. Spring ahead 1 hour. It should be later tonight. And yes, tomorrow is the Oscar night, which is funny because that's the theme I want to talk about today, about the Oscars. And no, I haven't done my Oscar prediction yet. I'm going to wait until tomorrow, and usually when I'm online, I'll do that, and then I'll have about 20 people calling me, asking me what I think is going to win Best Picture. I honestly don't know yet, because the past few years, a lot of the ones that they pick for the Oscars seem to be these movies that are more of the art indie type films. Some of the ones, like, I don't even know what last year's winner was, or I don't know what the. I know the year before was the one called Parasite. I remember that. That was probably the last one I had seen, so. I don't know. Hollywood hasn't really done a lot of the mainstream movies as the Oscars yet, but who's to say that it won't? So it's just a matter of watching it and seeing what happens, and then going from there. So today I've brought a few Oscar, just a few little Oscar films that I've got one Best Picture or Best Screenplay, Best Actor or whatnot, and yeah, we can get to it and see. First one that I have here is, and if my sister's let me know if she's got this.
Yep.
Yep, it's Apocalypse Now. It was made in 1979. Starred Marlon Brando and Martin Sheen. And yeah, it's basically a boat ride through the jungles, looking for jungles of Vietnam, I believe it was, and they're looking for Marlon Brando's character. You have to bear with me. Like I said, I got a cold, so I'm not going to be my usual coherent self a bit. So yeah, Marlon Brando's character is Colonel Kurtz. He's a elusive and elusive soldier that was part of the war. And I guess he went into hiding in the jungles. So Martin Sheen's character has to take this long boat ride through the jungles to try and find him, which is basically the premise of the whole film itself. And there's a little note that there's a scene where Martin Sheen actually breaks it. He goes into this thing at the start of the film, and I believe he actually had a breakdown or a heart attack or something. Somebody was saying that it was a heart attack or a breakdown that he had during the first part of the film, and they actually kept it in the film. Like, I'm not sure 100% on this, so I'm not really gonna say for sure, but yeah, somebody had mentioned that, and the film is excellent. It's directed, of course, by a famed director and head of the Zoetrope Studios back, and that was Francis Ford Coppola. And Coppola was, as we all know, was the one that also directed Brando in the movie The Godfather. So yeah, it's sort of a reunion of sorts. Here I actually have the 153-minute version. There was a redo. Actually, there was a couple redos because they did one as well called the Apocalypse Now: The Final Cut. And there's a good documentary that goes with this movie too. It's called Heart of Darkness, and it documents Coppola's directing the film and the different things that happened during the making of the film. And a lot of it was actually very as dark as the movie itself, if not even more frightening and harrowing. And but that's the part of filmmaking, though, that's the unexpected. You have to expect the unexpected at all times, and sometimes even during time that you're making a movie. So yes, you have Apocalypse Now as our first one here, and the next one, Neil Jordan does a movie. This one here, The Crying Game. I don't know if anybody's seen that. I don't know if you've seen this one or not.
I don't think I have.
Best original screenplay for the Oscar, and yeah, in this one here you have Stephen Ree, Miranda Richardson, Jane Davidson, and Forrest Whitaker. Wow, I didn't even know he was even in this one, which shows how much attention I was paying to it. But it's still one of the top films that was made at its time, and more or less I'll give you a little synopsis here as what it says on the box here. It says, Jody, a British soldier, is being held hostage in Ireland's South Armagh County by IRA terrorist Fergus and his fellow conspirators. During his captivity, Jody reminisces about his life, and Dill, the woman he loves, sharing his dreams with his captor. Fergus is responsible for Jody's death. He runs away from his Confederates in England to find Dill, a hairdresser by day, bar singer at night. Dill is unaware of the relationship between Jody, her dead lover, and Fergus. And it says here the two become close, oblivious to the past is closing in on them. Set in the killing fields of Northern Ireland and seedy contemporary London, the crime game is tough and troubling, yet filled with warmth and wit. So the critics actually said, on 100 critics, said it was on their 10 best list as one of the most profound and prolific films that had been made at that time up to that point. It was made back in 1992, and it showed even then, like, films have come a long way since then. However, at the time, this was groundbreaking. It was a groundbreaking film, so it's another one that I would recommend, as well as Apocalypse Now. Okay, next we have Robert De Niro in this Michael Cimino film called The Deer Hunter, and here again it was a winner of 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor. Christopher Walken, who actually made a major name for himself in this movie. And it's basically a group of workers in a factory, steelworking factory in Pennsylvania, and they go to Vietnam as they are drafted. At the time, the draft was really in effect, so they end up going to Vietnam, and what they go through, the many friendships that they have, and of course showing how courageous that they can be. It's a searing drama of what happens to these qualities under stress. It's a shattering emotional experience. I'll never forget it. And I remember seeing this movie years ago. I saw it on a TV. I think you got this, by the way. I saw it on a TV screening once, and it was very impressionable. It left a valuable impression on me, and to this day I still remember seeing it. And I didn't even understand the Vietnam cause at the time, because I was born in 1970, and Vietnam went from the 60s all the way through to about, I think it was 73, 74, I'm not sure, because I was still very young at the time. But I had actually seen this film. Like, a friend of ours saw it on TV, so I sat and watched it with them, and I had no idea what the film was about. But when you rewatch it now, you understand more of Vietnam and a lot of the soldiers going through all this stress and shell shock and all the different things that they went through. And it like Apocalypse Now, it really captures the feeling of what it was like to actually be in part of Vietnam during the time of the war, and how it affected so many people. Like, the steelworkers are just regular people. They're thrust into these extraordinary circumstances, and then they realize all of a sudden that that what they're in is, in a sense, way over their heads, and it's what they have to deal with. So yes, Deer Hunter is another one I would recommend as well. And winning the 5 Academy Awards really helps it. It's 3 hours and 3 minutes, so it'll take time to really sit through. So you have to have a lot of patience. And a lot of these lengthier films, like Lawrence of Arabia and like Deer Hunter, you have to have a lot of patience to be able to sit through something like that. Hey, in 1991, I believe this one is here, yes. This, again, this is about JFK, the story that won't go away. It's more or less about Oliver Stone did this movie about the politics at the time and the death of the Kennedys. And Oliver Stone, believe it or not, was a Vietnam vet himself. So he had a lot of the experiences already implanted by the time he came around to making this film. And JFK is the winner of 2 Academy Awards, by the way. He was a Golden Globe winner, Best Director, Oliver Stone. Yes. And of course, rated 4 stars as a masterpiece. But if you really want to get analytical about the JFK assassinations and the various politics of the White House during that time, like Deer Hunter in a sense, there's very strong echoes of that in JFK, and you get to learn about the tragedy of when Kennedy was assassinated. There's another movie I actually have at home called Bobby, which takes place during the Bobby Kennedy assassination at the hotel he was at in '68, I believe it was. And but this one here is like about JFK, John F. Kennedy, of course. And yeah, Kevin Costner delivers a very powerful punch to the gut performance, and it's another one that you really have to sit and be patient to watch, because if there's not a lot of action, at least at the same time, what you do is you appreciate it for the acting that's in the film itself. So yeah, there's JFK and Deer Hunter and Apocalypse Now, 3 films that deal with Vietnam, and something you could really appreciate from just watching them. Now we go to a different type of war. Funny how some of these are like war pictures. The winner of 10 Academy Awards, including the Best Picture 1939. And that was the story based on Margaret Mitchell's novel, Gone with the Wind. The story of Scarlett O'Hara and living on the plantation during the time of the slavery in the late 19th century. And of course, Rhett Butler, who comes to live there, and well, he's the one that enters this love triangle between him, Scarlett O'Hara, and Ashley Wilkes, played by Leslie Howard. And Gone with the Wind was one of the great films at the time. David O. Selznick masterfully put this film together, and there was so much that went through into the making of Gone with the Wind. In fact, in 1939, you had movies like Gone with the Wind, you had Wizard of Oz, you had Mr. Smith Goes to Washington with James Stewart. So 39 was actually considered the most profitable era in cinema history, because you had all these different films that were coming out. And the scary thing is that the World War II was about to break out at the same time. You had the Depression. And then you had all these really classic films. And yeah, recently, I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago, probably 2 years ago, we lost Olivia de Havilland, who lived to about 101 years old. And she was still around even up to this point in time. But yes, it's the movie that made Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh famous. And of course, you had an all-star cast, including, as one of the Tarleton twins at the start of the movie, a young George Reeves, who everybody knows played Superman in the Adventures of Superman TV series. So on this one here, you have the movie, and with commentary and disc, and that takes 2 discs alone to do the whole film. On disc 3, you get about the movie, where the documentary, The Making of Legend, Gone with the Wind, Restoring the Legend, 1939. Atlanta premiere newsreels, prologue from international release version, foreign language version, sample scenes, and historical short subject, the Old South. And this 4 is all about the cast, so you get the profiles about Vivian Lee, Clark Gable, Olivia de Havilland, and sporting players, which I felt really deserved its place. The movie was actually, at one point, they were considering banning it from theaters because of the racial tones of the time. But the thing is, in the 19th century, there was a lot of racial things. There was racial segregation. There was a lot of prejudice, and the feelings at that time were very strong about that. And I always believe that instead of banning something like that from a theater, people need to see it. People need to recognize what was going on at that time. And it's movies like this that can really bring that to light so that people understand what was going on in the time. And even though the story is fictional, it does give you an idea of what the feelings of the time were, and you get to see a lot of good war scenes. There's a really good scene, the burning of Atlanta, like when Atlanta burns, and the fire and the scene is just huge. And like I said, I don't want to give anything away for anybody that hasn't seen Gone with the Wind. Yeah, I want them to be able to appreciate the history that's actually brought into the mainstream through this film, and it's one I would definitely watch, no doubt. Okay, in 1993, Steven Spielberg did his Academy Award winning Schindler's List, which actually won the award in 1993 for Best Picture that year. And it's about about an enigmatic Oskar Schindler. He's a member of the Nazi Party, a war profiteer who saves the lives of more than 1,100 Jews during the Holocaust. So you get, again, so you go from the history and of the racial times of the 19th century to the time of the Holocaust. And it's a very, very powerful film. It's certainly earning its place as a cinematic masterpiece of all time. And the film is held in high honor, and it's certainly Steven Spielberg. It's one of his best films, if not the best film overall that he had made. Like, I know a lot of people gravitate to Jaws, but Schindler's List was more of the real issue, the issues of what were going on during the time of the Holocaust. And it's I remember seeing it, and I remember actually tearing up a lot because, yeah, if you're sensitive to certain things like the Jewish people being persecuted and all that, and what they went through and the torture at the hands of the Nazis, yeah, it might not be a type of movie that you could watch because there's a lot of sensitivity that's in there, but it's a classic, and I was glad to pick it up on DVD, and one I definitely will be revisiting soon. Okay, next. In 1982, we have Academy Awards, 8 Academy Awards for this one. You got this one here, Tuzas?
Mm-hmm.
Gandhi. It won 8 Academy Awards, including the Best Picture, Best Director, Sir Richard Attenborough, and Best Actor, Sir Ben Kingsley. And it's one of the most highly acclaimed cinematic masterpieces of its time, too. And it's about the peaceful Mahatma Gandhi. Yeah, he was the leader in East India, like the peacekeeping and stuff. And like Schindler's List, it's another powerful movie that I would definitely recommend anybody seeing. And I remember we saw this in school once. It's 191 minutes, by the way, just so you know. And I don't know if you could sit through that. He says 191 minutes.
Probably.
Yeah, it's. I remember seeing it in school. We took it, I believe, in English, and I remember we wrote a thesis on it afterward. So but yeah, for its time, it was very very profound, and certainly you get a good story. You get a story about activism, act yeah, activism, politics, religious tolerance, and of course the most the most prized thing of all, freedom. And of course, this extraordinary man, Mahatma Gandhi, who fights for a non-violent, peaceful existence and set an entire nation free. And the cinematography is just spectacular in this movie, and of course the acting. What more can be said? Sir being Ben Kingsley in this movie, and the direction of Sir Richard Attenborough. You can't really say anything more. It's just it's a movie that's indescribable and how great it actually is. And then finally, what AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies voted as the top movie of all time, Orson Welles' Citizen Kane. And I remember I first saw this movie in 1974 when Magic Shadows came on. Elwy Ost actually had it as the first movie that he showed on television, which was this one here. And I watched it when I was 4 years old. And I didn't understand it at the time, but watching it today, the more you see it, the more you get to understand, the more you absorb into the film about Charles Foster Kane, the newspaper magnate. And I remember, I don't know if I've ever talked about this movie before, but yes, it was based on the newspaper tycoon William Randolph Hearst, and which is actually the centerpiece of when I'm discussing about the movie, which was fantastic, by the way. But Hearst was not a big fan of this movie because once he found out that the movie was loosely based on his life and a lot of the idiosyncrasies that he had and the things that he did, some of the unscrupulous practices that he did as well to maintain a position of power in the world of mass media. He actually attempted to get this movie banned from several theaters and did manage, in fact, to get the movie banned from playing, and of course he used it through intimidation. And because they say the pen is mightier than the sword, well, yes, in the case of Randolph Hearst, because he was the most powerful newspaper magnate of that time, he was able to get a lot done. But he didn't count on the fact that Orson Welles was determined to get this movie distributed and seen, and he did. And today they consider it one of the greatest, if not the greatest, motion picture of all time. And there's so many different moments in this movie that are great. The opening scene being the most memorable scene that you could see in the movie. And Orson Welles, like a lot of the other actors, delivered a very powerful performance in this movie, and he was very well casted. And a lot of the cast were from his Mercury Theater radio program. So when he got around to making this movie, he gathered up a lot of his radio personality, and they made up the cast of different characters that are in the movie. But yes, this one, as well as a movie that I've seen from 1915, D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, and which was a very impactful movie at the time that it was made, because they dealt with the Ku Klux Klan, and they had to deal with the fact that this movie seemed to almost glorify their actions. Well, the Birth of a Nation did. So it showed that, and this film, and for that matter, most of the films that I've just talked about actually show you the impact of motion pictures, the message that's delivered through watching a movie, and these movies, how they majorly impacted even the world that they were being released into. So yes, I remember on this document, there's a documentary on here too, which is equally Oscar worthy. It's called The Battle Over Citizen Kane, and it chronicles the clash between Wells, RKO student and publishing magnate William Randolph Hearst, whose life and accomplishments reportedly inspired Citizen Kane, which I was just saying there earlier. So it was a impactful, masterfully well done, acted movie, and well deserving as an all-time classic. So, with that being said, those are the movies that I want to discuss today, because as tomorrow is the Oscars, and I hope you'll be watching those. So, yes, again, I'll be delivering my prediction tomorrow during the day. I have to check out the nominees list. A friend of mine just put it up, so tomorrow I'm going to be looking at the nominees list, finding out what movie won Best Picture and some of the other categories, and then make my choices from there. But for now, this is Paul Westbrook reminding you to like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below so that we can hear your input, because your input is just as valued as me ranting and raving on here. And of course, thanking my sister for the good camera work. I know sometimes it shakes, but don't worry, it's still good. And we still got people watching, and hoping to get 60 subscribers, I think, is it, sis? Or
At least.
At least 60 subscribers, which would be great. So, with that being said, for now, it's Paul Westbrook reminding you, watch the Oscars, and I'll be seeing you at the movies. So long for now.